welcome back to the second part to the Angelian lectures. To reiterate, we can say that the Greek word arpui and abductor, in English, modern English, are harpy. We are referring here to a phenomenon, and therefore typically we can see that the harpy is represented symbolically as this clawed entity. This bird is a human. It combines the human form, so it's human, but it's also angelic because of the wings and the reptilian features. The bird itself, the bird is also a bird of prey and is clawed, and therefore the claws of the bird denotes this abductor. Now, the harpy, reported as a ravenous creature with a woman's head and a trunk possessing the wings of a bird and sharp talons, is arguably the same type of entity extruded in biblical and Middle Eastern symbolism as the winged messenger. So we're seeing that there is this, that the symbology coalesces. In particular, the avian female is emblematic of a being whose origins are descended from heaven. So, we can say that esoterically the arpui, collectively the abductors, is symmetrical with Opelita soldier. So I'm drawing a comparison between Opelita soldier and arpui and abductor, which in the esoteric tradition would identify the abductor, or connoting a dragon, with the angelic host. So in the context outlined, the military lexicon is en passant to an angel or a dragon, an entity which is viewed as a type of harpy, Greek arpui, one that sees us. In other words, we can translate the terminology as a type of reptile. At a symbolic level, the harpy is conceptualized as a sailor and as an agency that is twinned in the classical mysteries with the angelic host. And this is very important, and we can establish this connection when we begin to deconstruct the etymologies. So careful and methodical reasoning indicates that the arpui and abductor is an elaboration semantically on the theme of Opelite, a foot soldier, a contingency symbolized with Opelon, a shield. Now these are important signifiers because the shield, Opelon, a shield, is used in the classical traditions to refer to the angelic vessels. The angelic ship is actually rendered with the shield, and this is important to understand this when we're deconstructing the symbology of the angelic host. Now the epithet Opelita soldier is directly related both to the verb pleo, to sail, and suggests that the arpy is a type of naval force, one that fits conceptually into the framework of an angel, which, as we said before, is depicted as a mariner. Hebrew, malak an angel and malak a sailor. The comparison regarding the harpy as a type of a reptile, akka an abductor or host, are listed in the following etymologies. And it's important for us to understand these etymologies in order to be able to progress with the lecture and to understand the connotations. So I'm going to read these again because this is very central and integral to understanding the thesis. But we can see that the term harpy, which is an abductor, one who is represented with claws or talons, is equated symbolically at a symbolic level with herpeton, a reptile. As we said, the reptile typically is used to personify a type of angelic being. In the Aramaic, this would be the seraphim. But there is this close cognate in the Greek, at least, with arpui and abductor and Opelita soldier. So at a symbolic level, the abductors, the harpies, are once again equated with the angelic multitude. Now the signifier of the angelic multitude is Opelon, a shield. And this is because Opelon, a shield, at a linguistic, semantically, Opelon, a shield, is equated with pleon, a boat or a ship, because the shields themselves would be adorned on the side of a vessel. So the angelic ships are represented typically with a shield, which is correlated with Opelite, which would infer the angelic host. And we can see that there is this relationship between pleon, a boat, and pleo, to sail. So these signifiers begin to tie in. We can see that the shield itself is a signifier of the boat, and the boat is a symbol of an angel or one who abducts. Technically, we would say a dragon. So, an important point to make is that in the Greek tradition, the shield is used esoterically to denote an angelic ship, and in the Judaic scriptures is illustrative of a sacred order of angels referred to as the Ophanim. Now, the term Ophanim means the circular ones, or those belonging to the wheels. Now, in Apocrypha writing, these group of beings are once again depicted as a type of militia, which is cognate with the angelic host. Significantly, many of the characteristics of the Ophanim, the circular ones in biblical and Hellenistic mythology coalesce with the discipline of ufology. So we're seeing that again, that the UFO itself is often circular in shape. It's almost shield-like. The shield is an excellent metaphor for a UFO. And is relevant, as we said, for the contemporary depiction of the UFO, or the flying saucer. Now, we're going to look at the ophonym in more detail in the lecture Flying Shields and Deities from Sirius. But I just want to draw attention here to the slide, because we see with this slide we have got the what is essentially a cherubim. The translation would be a cherubim in modern English. And this cherubim is carrying a shield, which symbolizes this angelic vessel. It connotes the ophonym, because typically within biblical scriptures, the ophonym is always correlated with the cherubim and sometimes with the seraphim as well. So we see that there is this relationship between both the seraphim, the cherubim, and the ophonym. The ophonym are the circular ones, but are registered within Greek symbology with this circular shield. The circular shield which is used to adorn the boat a symbol of an angelic ship, of a vessel. So, further analysis of the Greek vocabulary clearly substantiates the hypotheses that the angels are a naval force that originate from the stratosphere, and in a literal sense the strata region of space, a critic reference to stratos, an army. So again, even in our terminology, the stratosphere refers to stratos, an army, which has this connotation originally of the angelic host. We can see that strata is a grade. In this respect would be a type of angelic grade. So the term is used in Greek to signify the heavenly host. So in other words, the sky itself is identified with the host, the heavenly host. Now in Arabic, a similar wordplay is found in the description faliki, which is a ferryman, and falak, the sky or the atmosphere. Now in Gnostic tradition, the ferryman is the messenger of death, or is the bringer of death. But we see there is this crossover between the Gnostic tradition and the tradition of the angels themselves, which are depicted as sailors or mariners. So just to look at the slide or the image on the screen, we can see that the angel in this case is personified as an abductor. We see that the wings of the angel once again would be a word play on the ophonym. We can see that Epher is a bird. We have Apher, which is an asp, which would represent the seraphim, the shining ones. The shining halo, again, is a symbol of the angel. But the angel in this image is carrying a child. Now, the child is a signifier of the human lineage, because the child is small. Typically, in the representation of deities, a deity is represented as large and man is represented as small. And the excellent metaphor to describe this is a child. So typically we see that the angels, and particularly because within the esoteric tradition there are two lineages and two angelic lineages. There is the human lineage, the Adamic lineage, and then we have the seraphim, or this serpent lineage, which is correlated with the worship and veneration of deities. So in Greek legend we can see that the Apui, literally the ones who snatch, otherwise erpton, a reptile, is equivalent in Arabic to misik, to grasp, and is a cognate of masik, a monster. Furthermore, the harpy is a creature that is kindred to the mythical race, the Lamia, a type of serpent being, and is an important comparison, and suggests a relationship between the dragon identified with a shining deity, or with an angel. So we're going to look at this connection then between the harpies, and in particular another serpent type of deity which are referred to as the Lamia. So we can see, as with the Greek word apui, which is a type of abductor, the Lamia corresponds philologically with the Greek verb lambano, which is catch, find, have, hold, receive, or to take. So this is a wordplay, but this would be a wordplay which would be conversant with the priesthood. They would be aware of this association. And in addition, the definition lamia is nearly identical to the Aramaic verb lami, bright or shining. So the lamia themselves are personified as the Elohim, the shining ones, the watchers, the deities. And it would link the lamia, as we said, with the watcher or the shining one. Otherwise, these are all metonyms which are used to describe a dragon, a seraph, or an Elohim. Elohim being the generic term for a deity in the Middle Eastern tradition. So, in summary, the harpy, reptile, lamia, and dragon are all equated with theft and abduction in conjunction with naval vessels. So, in other words, the plunder, the quarry is stolen, is taken away on a naval vessel. But this is no ordinary naval vessel, because this is considered to be an angelic vessel. This is one which is steered or commandeered by Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the angelic host. As we can see in the following list, when we look at the lamia, we see that the lamia is concordant both with the jinn and also with the dragon. So let's have a look at the correspondence. Now, in this slide, we can see here, I've put the word shedim, which is a word which appears in Palestine and refers to a type of jinn. But the shedim themselves are also identified with abduction. I'm going to quickly read through the slide and just go over these etymologies so that we are clear that these deities are one and the same phenomenon. And then I'm going to deconstruct the slide. So with the information we've got, we know that the Apuis are a type of an abductor and that they are a close cognate of Erpeton, a reptile. Erpeton, a reptile, is closely equated with the verb erpain, to creep. And lamia is a type of serpent deity, which, because they are rendered typically they're typically represented as human beings, but with a seraph's tail. The tail would relate to the footprint of the entity, which is deemed as being angelic. But we see that the lamia can be represented as lami in the Aramaic, the bright or the shining ones, and lambano, which is to catch, find, or have, which would link the bright or the shining ones with the dragons, as we said before, the Erin and the Elohim and the Awim, which is a serpent in the Greek, Theos a god, Theoros a watcher, and Therion a beast. Now, we see also with the jinn we see that there's this relationship with gul, which is a type of jinn, a type of blood-sucking jinn, and gala, which is the etymology to seize. So in a similar way, the jinn themselves are represented as those who abduct and can be quite easily translated with the Greek word harpy or dragon. The representation, again, fits in with drakon and drasomi, to grasp. In Arabic, masika, monster, and misik, to grasp. So just looking at the traditions of St. George, and actually just before we go into St. George, I just want to deconstruct this slide. Now we have on this slide the shedim, and we know that they are the shedim because when we begin to break down the etymology, shedim is from the etymology sauda, which is black, and sauda is a close cognate of the secret priesthood, the Sodi. The Sodi is the priesthood of Moses, and they worship Shaddai. The Lord of the host is referred to as Shaddai, but Shaddai is a derivation from shed, or shedim, a jinn, a ghost, a ghoul, or a goblin. So the Lord of the host himself is closely equated with the shedim. So we see that these are a type of shedim which are taking a child, that the wrappings of the child, where the child's foot is, it's painted red. This represents a red footprint. So this is the Adamic lineage which is being kidnapped or abducted by the jinn. And as I said before, the jinn themselves are represented as gul, from the etymology gala, to seize, which would equate the jinn with the seraphim, the angels, the shining ones, which are identified with this phenomenon of abduction. So now, if we go and have a look at this slide of St. George and the dragon, the same idea is essentially, it's very similar. The lady who is running away from the dragon, she's clothed in red, and the red is a symbol of the Adamic lineage. It's a little bit ambiguous here because this colour, it could be a pink, and sometimes pink is used to, the Adamic lineage is sometimes represented with white, which is a signifier of the shining ones, of the seraphim. So the colour pink is sometimes used to highlight a dual lineage, a human angelic lineage. And we can see that St. George here is trying to kill the dragon. The spear of St. George is often equated with the phallus, so again this is a dual lineage. The white horse is equated, in Hebrew, the white horse, sus, a horse, in colloquial Arabic is a worm. And if we cross-translate that again into the Old Semitic, Jen is a serpent or a worm, and Jinn is a type of supernatural entity. So the horse is typically used as a signifier either of the goat, of the Yale, of the unicorn, but these are all signifiers of the dragon. Now when we look at Andromeda and Perseus, Perseus is from the Arabic root, which is to cut or to slice. But we see here that the Andromeda's footprint is on the shell. And if we closely look, the shell is a bloody shell. And the shell itself is representing the female sexual organs. In particular, this would be a representation of the bath coal, which identifies the priestess, the menstrual priestess. And the menstrual blood is a signifier of the human lineage, of the Adamic lineage, which is represented with dam, which is blood. And the term shell, clip off a shell or a husk, also means a demon or a fallen angel in the Hebrew and Kabbalistic literature. So the shell is typically used to represent a dragon. And we see this also with Venus. Venus is another representation, a personification of the seraph, equated closely with light. Phosphorus is Venus and Phos is light. Venus is born from a shell. This is a serpentine or reptilian lineage. So we see that the priestess here, if we look at her feet are dipped in blood. So this is an Adamic lineage which is dipped into the shell, which is this human and angelic lineage. Now I want to go back to the lamia, which we said previously is closely equated in the Aramaic with lami, which is bright or shining, which is an esoteric signifiers of the Erin or the Watchers. But if we're being very technical about the etymology of lamia, we can see that its original root is from the Greek lamaros, which means gluttonous, and is conceptual in Arabic with the female jinn, gula. In colloquial Arabic, a greedy or a gluttonous individual. So gula is a modification of the more common noun ghoul, a ghoul or a blood-sucking jinn. So in many respects, these jinn are greedy, they're gluttonous, they're vampiric, and they are closely equated with the vampiric tradition. Now, the jinn, or the ghoul, is a name obtained according to Arab scholars from the verbal root gala to seize, which would imply that this entity is a type of dragon. And again, it has this connotation of a devil or a reptile, one who abducts, one who steals. Now, the connection is important as it shows that the jinn are also implicated with kidnapping and by definition can be identified with the harpy. So the harpy itself is an abductor and can be correlated with the lamia. A dragon, which are definitions used to refer both to a watcher and appertains to a deity or a seraph, variously a fallen angel. So if we just quickly look at this word list, we can see that lamia is a serpent being. It has the connotation in Aramaic of lami, which is a shining one. But we see that the correct terminology is located with lamaros, which is gluttonous. So in other words, we would locate the lamia with the ghoul. Ghoul in colloquial Arabic means greedy and is the original etymology of ghoul, which is a ghoul or a blood-sucking jinn. So the lamia are the same as the ghoul, which is a type of blood-sucking jinn. And as we see in this depiction of the lamia, the serpent's tail is another reference to the footprint or the bloodline of the serpent. In this respect, represented as human angelic. So there is this combination between the two lineages, which, as we said before, has a connotation of the royal lineage. Now, perhaps even stranger, the lamia, as with the harpy, is typically amalgamated with human characteristics. We saw this on the example of the slide. So typically they are represented with human characteristics such as hair and serpent signifiers such as scales, fins, tails. So these would connote the reptile. Now, we see that this is very much indicative of sexual union, which is attributed to a royal lineage, this human angelic lineage. Now, a type of accessory to the dragon, the appellation lamia, is picked up in the Roman noun lympha, which is a water or a water nymph. So again, the term lamia informs the Latin word lympha, which is a water nymph. So this is drawing a close etymological association between the lamia and the nymph being represented as the human angelic lineage, because the Greek word nymph means a bride. The Greek word nymph is a bride. And we see that the terminology itself is implicit of one who is alien or strange. So, for example, nymph, a bride in the Greek, is closely related in the Latin to the transitive verb nubia, which is to marry, esoterically nubes, a cloud. So we can see closely that nubia, which is to marry, is both accorded to the nymph, which is a type of nymph or a bride, and we can see that there's a close cognate of nubes, which is a cloud. So just to summarize this connection, so we can firmly see this connection, we can see that the lamia informs the word lympha, which is a water or a water nymph. Again, the signifier of water has this connotation of the angelic sailor, the angelic host. Nymph is a nymph or a bride, and we have nubia, which is to marry, and nubes, a cloud. So this is a heavenly lineage. This is one which is derived from heaven, which is represented, as we said, with water or with the sailor. In essence, the terminology for the nymph in the Latin would be the nubigina, the offspring of a cloud. And as we can see here, the nymph and its cognate mermaid are equated with abduction. And so in this context here, the mermaids are trying to seduce the men, which are shown to be on a type of vessel. But what's interesting about this picture is that they actually are depicted as shapeshifters. So we see that the mermaid herself, she's coming out of the water, and as these entities come out of the water, they are shown as looking human. So the implication here is that the heavenly sailor, or that these type of beings, that aspects of these beings have this ability to shapeshift. And when we look at the alien in particular, often the alien is said either to, sometimes the alien is described as a shining being, but often from abductees, people who have been taken by these beings, they say that these beings can project images within their mind, and that they appear to be able to shapeshift and take on human form. And we have another slide as well which shows this as well, and this is a fascinating slide. We see in this slide in particular that the lady which is being abducted here, that she has the serpent's tail around her body, and the individual here is shapeshifting. So he has this serpent's face, but he has the human characteristics, the human ear and human characteristics. In addition, we see star iconography, two stars, which would be the dual star system Sirius, which was often represented as a binary star. And we have the circular shield, which again would connote the ophonym being this angelic vessel, in the Greek opolite, a type of soldier, equated with pleon, which is a boat, and the shield, which are interconnected. So again, the representation of the nymph, as with the lamia, is typically identified with one who shines, which would equate the nymph with a type of deity. So the description of the nymph parallels the marriage of heaven and earth, which is termed in Latin as nubigina, the offspring of the cloud. Now, thus the nymph is suggestive of extracoitus, a term which means alien sex, and is closely related to the species of the lamia, Arabic lami, a shining one, nominal of an angel or seraph. So these terms are interchangeable. The nymph herself is identified with this offspring of the cloud. The offspring of the cloud, the heavens themselves is correlated with a sea, a type of sea in which these sailors originate from. Now, we can say that the lamia is technically a species of ghoul, which is a type of blood-sucking jinn. Now, in the case of the nymph, this class of spirit is depicted as a type of seducer or rapist. In Latin, we could say that this is a succupi, from the verb kuber, which is to lie. But again, it has this connotation of the cherubim, so there is this connection there. Now, we can say that the lamia is an entity that is sometimes represented with fish-like attributes. And again, we find this with the nymph also. The nymph and the mermaid has these fish-like attributes, which are signifiers of the sailor. A depredator or a sexual molester, the nymph or nubigina's activities are predisposed to the acquisition of stealing virile humans, an action which is termed in the classical tongue as nympholeptos. So in other words, the nymphs themselves are represented as reptilian, but they also are implicated with human theft. So we said that this correspondence was found in the Greek word herpeton, a reptile, and harpui, an abductor, but we're finding this correspondence also in the Latin mysteries with the nymph and the nympholeptos, which is to be caught or to be abducted by the nymphs. So if we begin to break down the etymology of nympholeptos, we can see that the terminology itself is from the verb lambane, which is to take hold of, and is a configuration based upon the past participle of leptos, which is caught. So in other words, the nymph actually steal, they catch people. Phonetically, leptos is reminiscent of the Greek adjective leproskele. So once again, one who steals or one who catches is correlated with lepros, which is scaly, which has this connotation of the dragon or the reptile. Again, the term lepros scaly is identified with lepis, a scale, and denotes the dragon. Furthermore, lepis, a scale, is esoteric of lupus, a wolf, highly suggestive of the dog star from which the reptile is said to originate. So, for example, in the ancient Semitic, Kabi is a messenger or an emissary, which we would translate in the Greek as angelos, an angel, but the Kabi themselves are equated with al-Kalb, the dog star in the Arabic. And again, there is this signification with the Old Semitic terminology, keb, which is a serpent, kab, which is a coil. So these wordplays are repeating over and over again that the connotations that the connotation of the reptile and the dragon are one and the same. So nympholeptos is equivalent in the contemporary idiom to alien abduction, which in a similar manner implies sexual interference from a non-human entity. In the ancient idiom, a seraph or a reptile. So again, alien abduction, these entities are seraph-like or serpentine in appearance, and they are equated with the sexual molestation of individuals, of people who are taken on strange vessels. Now, as demonstrated in the Roman mysteries, the snake appertains to a being commonly referred to as a dragon, and is an animal synonymous with the reptile, a rapist or an abductor, invariably a type of deity or angel, as we said before, a type of watcher, a seraphim, shaft. The seraphim would be identified with shaf, which is to see, sapan, a sailor, and safina, a ship. So going back just very quickly to the nymph, we can see that the nymph is typically an abductor in the same way that the harpy is, that the nymph and the etymology of nymph in particular in the Roman and Latin mysteries is equated with the nubagina, an offspring of a cloud. The cloud itself a signifier of this angelic sailor. And we can see when we break down the etymology of nympholeptos, caught by the nymphs, that there is this cognate with which is lepis with a scale, lepros scaly. So there is this connotation with the dragon. Now the connotation extends back to lupus, which is a wolf, a signifier of the dog star, and is a connection we will examine further in lecture 4. So the assertion that the dragon is an abductor is perhaps best amplified in the Babylonian mysteries, in which the deity Anas, the fish god, reflects the Aramaic noun Anas, a rapist. So not only are we finding this correspondence in the Greek between Arpui, an abductor, and Erpaton, a reptile, but we find the cognomen also with Anas, the fish god, and Anas, a rapist, a cognomen of the Libyan dialect of Hanas, a serpent. Now this is important because this would establish firmly the symbology of the dragon closely equated with the amphibian or with the fish. So these are terms which are interconnected in the ancient Semitic. So we see here there is a cognate. Anas, the fish god, is a cognate of a dragon, closely accorded with Anas, a rapist, and Anas, a serpent. Of course, these terms themselves are grouped with Anu or An, which would be heaven. And we can see here we have a representation of the fish deity Anas. So again, we have this fish entity which is depicted on the slide. Now, even more intriguing, we can say that the Libyan noun for serpent, Hanas, a serpent, but as we said before, Hanas connotes Anas in the Aramaic, which is a rapist or an abductor, is further a colloquial play on the plural noun Alnas, the people, and is a pun on Nasser, a fish. The epithet describes aptly a race of non-human entities conceived as reptiles or amphibians. A polyglottal pun, the paranomasia, is cross-referenced in the Greek language with a daemon, a divinity or a supernatural entity. This is rendered in the Arabic as a jinn. And it's an entity which is associated with demos, a people. So again, the daemon themselves are correlated with demos, a people. Likewise, the Arabic appellation jinn, a supernatural being, which, as we said before, has the connotations in the Old Semitic of gen, a serpent or a worm, is a play on the Latin feminine article gens, a nation or a people. And infers heavenly lineage. As with the deity Anas, the genie is equated in Arabic with jima, sexual intercourse. So I'm just highlighting these wordplays, but we can see But the serpent not only is an esoteric signifier of the watcher or the seraphim, but is accorded with a separate race of beings which are different, which are alien to the human species. And we find that these wordplays are found within Anas, which is a type of reptile or rapist, as we said, Anas is to rape. But the wordplay also has this connotation of a people. So Hanas the serpent is correlated with Alnas, the people. So we are dealing here with the serpent race. In the Latin, this would be the Serpentagena or the Anguagena, both denoting the serpent race. In Greek also, daemon is a cognate of demos, a people. And this actually puts an interesting spin on democracy, because demos is people, but has this connotation of a daemonic entity, and krasis is to rule. So this is regarding the rule of the jinn. So the connotation, again, can be very deceptive. The esoteric tradition of democracy refers to rule, but a rule which is identified with the serpentagena, or this angelic or alien lineage, which is represented as the serpent or monarchical. And again, if we look at the jinn, we see that there's a relationship with gen and nation. The association between the dragon and procreation is worth just reiterating once again. So I'm going to ask the audience now to look at the slides. As we said before, the dragon is a type of rapist, is one who steals or abducts. But we can see when we begin to put these etymologies together that in terms of the alien phenomenon, it begins to make much more sense, and we can see that this phenomenon is ancient in its designs. But we see that the fish god, Anas, the fish god, is yet just another word for Hanas, which is a serpent. The implication is a type of reptilian or amphibian being. But this serpent deity, again, is accorded with Anas. Anas being a type of rapist. So here we are dealing with the Nubagena, the offspring of the clouds, this offspring which is deemed as human angelic. In the Arabic also we have genie, which is a jinn, jimma, sexual intercourse, and gen, a serpent or worm. So Anas, the fish god, essentially is describing the worship or the veneration of entities which are correlated with the jinn. And we can see also within the slides that this idea that the angels are abductors are found in many, many different references in religious iconography. So, for example, the top slide of two angels carrying away an individual. Again, this idea is of abduction. We see with St. George and the dragon, sometimes the mistress is represented as pregnant. This would infer a human angelic lineage. And we can see that the spear or the shaft of St. George is protruding into the dragon's mouth, is penetrating the dragon's mouth. The mouth of the dragon equated with the sexual organs of the dragon. The white horse of St. George is an identifier of a goat, or this human angelic lineage, which is typically represented with the red cross, which is an Adamic signifier. Again, when we look at the traditions of the nymph and the Nubagena, they are typically represented as originating from the water, an esoteric signifier of the angelic sailor, and we see that there is this connection with nympholeptos, which is to be abducted, this human angelic lineage. We can see when we review Anas, the fish god, the Babylonian fish god, that his namesake infers Hanas, which is a serpent, otherwise Anas, a rapist, and is bridled in the Aramaic with the noun Anan, a cloud. So this is a heavenly serpent, one whose origins is sourced from heaven. Now the term Anan, a cloud, is derived from the Akkadian derivative An, Evan, and again we can see that the deity Anu is typically represented as the jackal. The jackal is a signifier used to denote the dog star. So we're seeing again with the crossover here that these deities are typically identified with the star system Sirius. Now, the reptile is therefore represented as a type of ravager and is summative of a heavenly being, Latin Nubagena, an entity that originates from the sky and is a creature that enforces or steals human beings. Many of the same comparisons of the Nubagena, the offspring of the clouds, are highlighted with their propensity for sexual intercourse and abduction.